This story is titled, My Golden Child Brother Tried to Ruin My Wedding, but My Fiancée's Revenge Was Perfect. Hey everyone, if you're enjoying these stories and want to support the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It really helps our channel. Now let's start the video. OP starts by saying, growing up with Ethan as my older brother was like living in someone else's spotlight. He was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, the one who got all the praise and attention. From as early as I can remember, everything in our family revolved around him. Ethan was the straight A student, the star athlete, and even the student council president. Every report card, every sports trophy, and every school event seemed to be another reason for my parents to gush about how amazing he was. Me? I was just his younger brother. I existed in his shadow, barely noticed except when someone needed a comparison to highlight Ethan's brilliance. Family gatherings, holidays, birthdays, everything followed the same pattern. Ethan would be the center of attention, while I was just there. Take Christmas, for example. Every year was predictable. Ethan got the best gifts, original Lego sets, cool gadgets, or the latest toys that every kid wanted. One year, he got a Lego Technic set, complete with working motors and intricate designs. It was the kind of gift that made kids in our neighborhood jealous. I, on the other hand, got a knockoff Lego set that didn't even have proper instructions. My parents brushed it off with, "Oh, you like to figure things out on your own, don't you?" Sure, Mom. That's exactly why Ethan got the premium set and I got the one missing half its pieces. This favoritism wasn't limited to just childhood. When Ethan turned 16, my parents celebrated it like a milestone fit for royalty. They bought him a used BMW, claiming that a first car should be something prestigious. It was an old model, sure, but it was still a BMW. I'll never forget how proud they looked handing him the keys, like they had just secured his ticket to greatness. When I turned 16, I didn't expect the same treatment, but I also didn't expect to get Dad's old Ford, and I only got that because Ethan got an upgrade to a newer car. By the time I was a teenager, I'd come to accept my role in the family hierarchy. Ethan was destined for greatness, while I was just the afterthought. My parents didn't say it outright, but their actions screamed it. Ethan was always working so hard or under so much pressure that his mistakes were excused. When he failed a test, it was because he was exhausted from his extracurriculars. When he crashed Dad's car, it was because he was stressed after breaking up with his girlfriend. Meanwhile, when I achieved something, like winning a school competition, it was downplayed. The questions must have been easy this year, Mom once said with a shrug. Ethan's success didn't stop at high school. After graduation, he went to a fancy business school funded by my parents and some help from Ava's dad. It was a private institution with small class sizes, networking opportunities, and all the resources he could ever need. My parents called it an investment in his future. Me? I got into logistics on a scholarship. My parents didn't offer to help, and I didn't ask. I knew better by then. While Ethan partied at student events and joined fancy clubs, I was working nights unloading trucks to make ends meet. I remember coming home exhausted, only to hear Mom on the phone bragging about Ethan's brilliant ideas, or how he was already networking with potential business partners. No one asked about my classes or how I was juggling school and work. They didn't even know I had landed a scholarship. The pattern continued at every family gathering. No matter what I was doing, the conversation always circled back to Ethan. It was like a broken record. Ethan's grades, Ethan's plans, Ethan's bright future. Even when I started working after graduation, climbing the ranks in my company, it didn't seem to matter. Ethan had already opened his first restaurant, funded by our parents and Ava's father. They acted like he'd built the entire thing from scratch, conveniently forgetting the loans and family money that made it possible. The restaurant itself was flashy, a modern Instagram-worthy place that got a lot of attention. But anyone who looked closely could see it wasn't exactly profitable. Without Ava's dad's distribution contracts, it probably wouldn't have lasted a year. Still, that didn't stop my parents from calling him a genius entrepreneur. They even threw him a huge party to celebrate the grand opening, complete with speeches about how proud they were. I wasn't invited to speak at the party, of course. I just stood in the corner, watching everyone toast to Ethan's brilliance. It didn't matter that I'd worked my way up from a junior manager to a regional director at an international logistics company. To them, I was still just Ethan's little brother, the one who would never measure up. Things reached a breaking point when Ethan married Ava. Ava came from a wealthy, influential family. Her dad owned a major distribution network, and her mom was heavily involved in charity events and social circles. Their wedding was a spectacle. Lavish, expensive, and the talk of the town. They had a destination ceremony, a honeymoon in the Maldives, and a house as a wedding gift from Ava's parents. My parents couldn't stop raving about it. "Look at what Ethan's achieved," they said, as if he had paid for any of it himself. I didn't envy Ethan's life. Not really. I'd learned to keep my expectations low, to focus on my own goals and happiness. But the constant comparisons wore me down. No matter what I did, it was never enough. I wasn't enough. That's when I met Mia. Meeting Mia was the turning point in my life. At the time, I wasn't really looking for anything serious. My focus was on work. I had just started climbing the ranks in my company, and it felt like the first time I was doing something that really mattered. But life has a funny way of surprising you when you least expect it. I met Mia at a corporate networking event, where our companies were working on a joint project. She was unlike anyone I had ever met. Mia was a lawyer, but not the kind you see in movies. Cold, calculating, and all about winning. She was warm, approachable, and had a sharp wit that could disarm anyone. From the moment we started talking, I felt like I was the most important person in the room, and that wasn't something I was used to. She didn't care about titles or flashy stories. She asked real questions, listened to my answers, and shared stories about her own life. I remember that night clearly. We ended up sitting in a corner, talking about everything from work to old movies we both loved. She mentioned her favorite was The Apartment, and I laughed because it happened to be mine too. We bonded over our love for 1,000-piece puzzles, though she admitted she never had the patience to finish them, and a shared obsession with Thai food. It felt easy, natural in a way that I'd never experienced before. For the first time in my life, I felt seen. With Mia, I wasn't just Ethan's younger brother or the guy working himself to exhaustion. I was me, and she liked me for it. We exchanged numbers that night, and things just took off from there. Our first date was at a small, hole-in-the-wall Thai restaurant she recommended. It wasn't anything fancy, but it was perfect. We spent hours talking and laughing, and by the end of the night, I already knew she was special. Mia didn't try to impress me or outshine me. She just was herself, and that was enough. As our relationship grew, I started feeling something I hadn't felt in years: confidence. Mia believed in me, and her belief made me start believing in myself. She didn't compare me to anyone, let alone Ethan. To her, I wasn't competing for attention or validation. I was already enough. A year later, I proposed. I didn't go for anything flashy. No grand gestures or viral-worthy surprises. It was just the two of us, sitting on a park bench where we had spent so many afternoons together. I pulled out the ring, barely managing to get through my speech, before she interrupted me with a resounding, "Yes!" We laughed about it later, how she didn't even let me finish. But that was Mia. She knew what she wanted, and she didn't need to overthink it. When I told my family about the engagement, their reactions were mixed. My mom was happy enough, though it felt more like she was going through the motions. My dad barely acknowledged it, muttering something about finally settling down. And Ethan? Well, Ethan gave me a grin and said, "About time, little bro." It felt patronizing, but I let it go. At least, I thought I did. Our engagement party was when things started to shift. Ethan showed up late, as usual, with Ava in tow. Ava was her typical self, posting photos to Instagram within minutes of walking in. "So happy to celebrate my brother-in-law-to-be." She captioned one photo, flashing her perfect smile for the camera. Ethan, on the other hand, seemed distracted. He congratulated me with a quick handshake and then spent most of the night hovering around Mia. At first, I thought I was imagining it. Ethan was always the life of the party, so it wasn't unusual for him to make conversation with everyone. But as the evening went on, it became harder to ignore. He found excuses to talk to Mia, asking about her work, complimenting her on her dress, even offering to help her navigate the legal paperwork for our upcoming wedding. Mia, being the polite person she is, didn't seem bothered. If anything, she thought Ethan was just being friendly. I didn't say anything that night, but the unease stayed with me. This wasn't the first time Ethan had tried to overshadow me, but it felt different. This wasn't about grades or gifts or who got the better car. This was personal. As the weeks went on, Ethan's behavior became harder to ignore. He started showing up at places where Mia and I would be, claiming it was a coincidence. He accidentally ran into her at a coffee shop near her office and made a big show of chatting with her while she waited for her order. He began attending events where Mia was a guest speaker, sitting in the audience like a proud supporter. The turning point came when Ethan brought up a new business opportunity at a family dinner. "I'm thinking of bringing in some legal help for my restaurants," he said casually. "Mia, you should consider bidding on the contract. It'd be great to keep it in the family." My parents thought it was a brilliant idea. See? Ethan's always looking out for everyone, Mom said with a smile. Mia hesitated but agreed to look into it. She's professional to a fault, and she wasn't going to turn down a potential client just because it was Ethan. But even then, she could tell something was off. I don't trust him, she told me that night. But I'll play along for now. Let's see what he's really up to. It didn't take long for Ethan to reveal his true intentions. He began messaging Mia late at night under the guise of discussing business. At first, it was about the contract, questions about timelines and legal jargon. But then the messages became more personal. You're too smart for my brother, he wrote one evening. You deserve someone more ambitious. Mia showed me everything. She wasn't the kind of person to keep secrets, and she didn't want Ethan's behavior to cause problems between us. He's testing the waters, she said, but I'm not going to let him get away with it. I was furious, but Mia was calm. Let him dig his own grave, she said with a smirk. He thinks he's playing me, but he doesn't know who he's dealing with. And so, we waited. At first, I thought Ethan's behavior would fizzle out, like so many of his impulsive ideas. But instead of backing off, he doubled down. His coincidental appearances around Mia became more frequent, and his late-night messages about work turned into something much more personal. Every time Mia showed me another message or call log, I felt my blood boil. It wasn't just about Ethan trying to undermine me anymore. He was actively disrespecting my relationship and crossing every possible line. It started small. Ethan began showing up at a coffee shop near Mia's office, the one she went to almost every morning. Funny running into you here, he'd say with a charming smile, even though it was obvious he'd been waiting for her. At first, Mia thought it was harmless. She'd exchange a polite hello, grab her coffee, and leave. But then he started lingering, asking her questions about her cases, or joking about how stressful being the lawyer for his restaurant was. Mia wasn't buying it. He's way too interested in my coffee habits, she told me one evening. It's not normal. Things escalated when Ethan began attending events where Mia was speaking. As a lawyer, she often participated in professional panels and conferences. It wasn't unusual for her to run into people she knew, but Ethan's presence quickly became a pattern. He'd sit in the front row, nodding along as if he were genuinely interested, and then make a point of talking to her afterward. You're such a natural speaker, he told her at one event. You make the rest of us look bad. When Mia told me about these encounters, I started to feel like I was losing my grip. Ethan had always been competitive, but this was something else entirely. It wasn't just about being the best, it was about taking something from me. I wanted to confront him, but Mia insisted we wait. He's digging himself deeper, she said. Let him think he's in control. Then came the business proposal. One evening at a family dinner, Ethan casually brought up the idea of hiring Mia's law firm to handle some contracts for his restaurants. It makes sense to keep it in the family, he said, flashing his usual grin. My parents thought it was a brilliant idea, of course. See how thoughtful your brother is? Mom gushed. He's always looking out for you. Mia played along, agreeing to review the proposal. She's a professional, and there was no way she was going to let her personal feelings interfere with her work. But the moment she accepted, Ethan took it as an open invitation to cross every boundary. The weekly meetings to discuss the contract turned into daily calls. The calls became longer, stretching into late hours. He'd text her after 10 p.m., saying things like, I hope you're not overworking yourself, or, you should take a break, you deserve it. It was infuriating, but Mia wasn't rattled. Instead, she began documenting everything. Every text, every call, every email. She kept screenshots and recordings. He thinks he's clever, she said, but he doesn't know who he's dealing with. The messages became more blatant as time went on. You're too smart for my brother, Ethan wrote one night. With your talent, you deserve someone who can match your ambition. I could show you a completely different life. By this point, Mia and I were in constant communication about Ethan's antics. She showed me every message and recorded every conversation. I was seething, but she remained calm. Let him keep talking, she said. He's giving us everything we need. The breaking point came a month before the wedding. Ethan invited Mia to a late-night meeting under the guise of discussing contract details. She agreed, knowing exactly what he was planning. After the meeting, he offered to drive her home. You don't have to call an Uber, he said. I'm heading that way anyway. In the parking lot, Ethan finally dropped all pretense. He reached for Mia's hand and said, Why go through with this wedding charade? My brother's a good guy, but let's face it, he's just a middle manager. He's not on your level. I could open doors for you, Mia. With me, you'd have the life you deserve. Mia, always one step ahead, had her phone recording the entire conversation. She feigned interest, asking, What about Ava? Doesn't she fit into your perfect life plans? Ethan sighed dramatically. Ava and I are just playing roles at this point. She cares more about Instagram followers and charity events than our marriage. It's all a show. But with you, it could be real. We'd be unstoppable. When Mia told me about the parking lot incident, I wanted to explode. He's not just crossing the line, he's obliterating it, I said. But Mia stopped me. Patience, she said with a smirk. We're going to handle this the right way. We decided to wait until the wedding to reveal everything. Mia continued to play along, saving every message and recording every call. Ethan, completely oblivious, thought he was winning. At family dinners, he'd sit next to Ava, smiling and holding her hand, while secretly texting Mia under the table. Imagine how we'd look together, one of his messages said. It's not too late to change everything. I couldn't believe the audacity. Ethan wasn't just trying to sabotage my relationship, he was betraying Ava, his own wife, in the process. It was disgusting, and I couldn't wait for him to get what was coming. A week before the wedding, Mia showed me everything she had collected. Screenshots of texts, call logs, recorded conversations, and even the parking lot video. He thinks he can ruin our happiness, she said, her eyes blazing with determination. But he doesn't understand who he's dealing with. I nodded, my anger finally giving way to resolve. Let's show everyone the real Ethan. The wedding day was perfect, or at least it started that way. Mia looked stunning in her dress, and I couldn't believe how lucky I was to be marrying her. Our families were all there, pretending everything was perfect. My parents were beaming, probably because this was the first time they could brag about me instead of Ethan. Speaking of Ethan, he was playing his usual role as the charming older brother, smiling for photos and shaking hands with the guests. He had insisted on being my best man, and my parents had gushed about how close we seemed now. The irony wasn't lost on me. Mia and I had spent weeks planning how we'd reveal the truth. It wasn't just about putting Ethan in his place. It was about showing everyone who he really was. He had spent his entire life manipulating people, playing the golden child, and getting away with everything. This time, there'd be no escape. The ceremony went off without a hitch. Ethan stood beside me, handing over the rings like the loyal brother he pretended to be. If anyone noticed the smug grin he kept flashing, they didn't say anything. Ava, as usual, was busy taking photos for Instagram, tagging them with hashtags like #perfectfamily and #wedding day goals. Mia and I exchanged vows, and for a moment, I forgot about everything else. I was marrying the woman I loved, and nothing Ethan could do would change that. The reception was where things got interesting. Ethan had been waiting all day to give his best man speech, and I could see he was practically bouncing with excitement. He probably thought this was his chance to steal the spotlight. As always, he stood up, tapped his glass for attention, and started with the usual cliches. Today is a special day, he began, smiling at the crowd. A day when my little brother finally finds the happiness he deserves. That's when the screen behind him flickered to life. At first, the guests didn't notice. But then the first screenshot appeared. A text from Ethan to Mia sent late at night. You're too smart for my brother. You deserve someone more ambitious. The room went silent as the second message popped up, then the third. Each one was worse than the last. The parking lot video came next, with Ethan's voice crystal clear. My brother's a good guy, but he'll always be just a middle manager. I could open doors for you. The silence was deafening. Ethan froze, his glass still raised, as the guests stared at the screen. My parents looked horrified, Mom covering her mouth with her hands while Dad just stared at the floor. Ava, however, was the real showstopper. She stood slowly, her expression shifting from confusion to disgust. So this is why you've been so interested in Mia's law firm, she said, her voice icy. That's why you insisted on their contract? Ethan stammered, trying to explain. It's not what it looks like, he said, his usual charm failing him for the first time in his life. Mia misunderstood. Misunderstood? Mia's voice cut through the room like a knife. She stood, calm and composed, and faced Ethan. Maybe you'd like to explain how I was supposed to understand these messages? Or the part where you tried to grab my hand in the parking lot? The guests started whispering, but no one moved. Ava's father, always the picture of composure, stood up silently and walked out of the room. Everyone knew what that meant. Without his father-in-law's support, Ethan's restaurants would crumble. Ava pulled off her wedding ring and placed it on the table in front of Ethan. We'll talk later, she said coldly. My lawyer will contact you. Ethan looked around the room, desperate for support, but no one came to his defense. My parents were too shocked to say anything. Dad just stared at the floor while Mom mumbled, "Oh my God," under her breath. For the first time in his life, Ethan's charm and excuses couldn't save him. Come on, we're family, Ethan said. his voice cracking. This was just friendly communication. Right, Mia? Mia didn't even flinch. Friendly communication? She repeated, raising an eyebrow. I have hundreds of messages from you, Ethan. Should I show everyone the one where you said, "It's not too late to change everything"? Ava didn't wait for an answer. She turned to the guests and gave a tight smile. Sorry for the scene, she said, her voice steady. Please, continue celebrating. This is still their day. The guests hesitated for a moment, but then the music started back up, and someone popped open a bottle of champagne. Ethan, meanwhile, stood frozen in place, his face pale. For the first time, everyone saw him for who he really was. He left quietly, slipping out the side door while everyone else returned to dancing and drinking. It was almost pathetic, watching the man who had spent his entire life at the center of attention walk away unnoticed. That night, as Mia and I sat together in the hotel suite, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of relief. It was over. Ethan's hold over my life, his constant manipulation and one-upping, had finally come to an end. Mia leaned her head on my shoulder and smiled. Well, she said, I'd say that went better than expected. The fallout from the wedding was swift and brutal, just as Mia and I had expected. The morning after, the family group chat was in chaos. My mom sent a flurry of messages, alternating between disbelief and excuses. This can't be true, she wrote. There has to be some misunderstanding. Dad, on the other hand, didn't say a word. He stayed silent, probably because there was no way to spin what had happened. Ethan's golden child image had been shattered, and this time, there was no sweeping it under the rug. As for Ethan, he disappeared, literally. No one heard from him for days after the wedding. He didn't go home, didn't answer his phone, and definitely didn't show his face at the restaurants. When I finally heard from my parents, they told me he was staying at a hotel, trying to figure out his next move. He's under a lot of stress right now, Mom said, still trying to defend him. You have to understand. He made a mistake, but he's your brother. I wasn't interested in hearing excuses. A mistake is forgetting someone's birthday, I replied. What Ethan did wasn't a mistake. It was calculated. He knew exactly what he was doing. Mom started crying, and Dad eventually took the phone. We just want to move past this as a family, he said. What's done is done. No, I said firmly. Ethan tried to destroy my relationship and humiliated himself in the process. That's on him. I'm not pretending this didn't happen. Meanwhile, Ava was moving fast. Within a week, she had filed for divorce and hired one of the best attorneys in the state. Her father wasted no time either. All contracts between his company and Ethan's restaurants were terminated immediately. Without those deals, the restaurants didn't stand a chance. Ethan had always relied on Ava's family connections to keep his businesses afloat, and without them, it was only a matter of time before everything fell apart. Mia and I tried to put it all behind us. We left for our honeymoon, determined to focus on each other instead of the chaos Ethan had left in his wake. For 2 weeks, we explored small towns, ate amazing food, and talked about our future. It was a much-needed escape, but when we came back, the aftermath was impossible to ignore. Ethan had returned to town, but he wasn't the same. The once confident, charming older brother was now a shadow of himself. His restaurants were struggling to stay open, and his reputation was in tatters. People whispered about what had happened at the wedding, and some of his former business partners quietly distanced themselves. Even my parents, who had always defended him, seemed unsure of how to handle the situation. Mom called me one evening, her voice hesitant. He's really struggling, you know, she said. Maybe you could reach out. He needs his brother right now. I almost laughed. He needs his brother? The same brother he tried to undermine at every turn? The same brother whose wedding he tried to ruin? Mom sighed. He made a mistake, but he's family. Doesn't that mean anything to you? Not when family only applies when Ethan needs something, I shot back. He's never cared about me, Mom. He only cares about himself. That was the end of that conversation. 3 months later, the situation hadn't improved for Ethan. He sold one of his restaurants to pay off debts, but it wasn't enough. By then, Ava was fully immersed in her father's business, thriving as a project manager for one of their biggest accounts. She didn't look back, and honestly, I couldn't blame her. She deserved better than the mess Ethan had made. My parents, for the first time in my life, seemed to see me differently. It wasn't an overnight change, but I noticed small things. They started asking about my work and actually listening when I talked about it. Mom even called Mia one day to ask for her opinion on a legal matter, something she would have automatically taken to Ethan before. It was strange, almost surreal, but I wasn't about to let myself get too comfortable. Years of being overlooked don't just disappear, because Ethan finally got what was coming to him. A year after the wedding, Ethan's restaurants were gone. He sold the last one and moved to another city, hoping for a fresh start. I heard through the grapevine that he was trying to launch a new business, but without Ava's father's connections, I doubted it would get far. My parents still talked to him occasionally, but even they seemed exhausted by his constant need for help. For once, they weren't running to fix his mistakes. As for Mia and me, we focused on building our life together. We bought a house, settled into a routine, and found out we were expecting our first child, a boy. The excitement of becoming parents helped push the drama of the past year into the background. I finally felt like I was stepping out of Ethan's shadow, creating a life that was mine and mine alone. Final note: people keep asking if I feel bad about what happened to Ethan. The answer is no. He destroyed his own life by being selfish and manipulative. All Mia and I did was shine a light on the truth. If that's what it took for people to finally see him for who he really is, then so be it.